The day my daughter kicked me out with 2 suitcases and no goodbye. I sat alone in a motel wondering if I'd become invisible. But then, buried in a box of old papers, I found a name, a number, and a secret that changed everything. Why would a mother turn into a silent landlord? And what happens when the ones who threw you out? Live under your roof, I'm Karen, and this is the story of how I went from discarded to owner. Stick around, I think you'll want to hear this. Not the Hallmark card, kind of forever. No, I'm talking about the kind you earn. The kind you build from holiday dinners, bandaged knees, late-night advice, and small, invisible sacrifices. The kind of forever where you carry each other through grief, not toss each other aside when it gets inconvenient. But forever cracked the night my husband, James, clutched his chest at the foot of our driveway and collapsed. Just like that. Gone before the ambulance ever made it to the curb. And then, everything fell in slow motion. I sold the house, packed up what life we'd built into 6 boxes, and moved into my daughter Sierra's duplex in Columbus. She had offered it, said it would make sense while I figured things out. Said Tyler, her fiancé, was on board. I should have known something was off the first night I arrived. Just dump your stuff in the back room, Tyler had muttered, not even looking up from his PlayStation controller. Sierra added quickly, we cleaned it out last week. Mostly, there might still be a few storage bins under the bed. I smiled, trying to hide the sting. No worries, hon, I'll make it work. But I could feel it, that quiet tension seeping into the walls. I kept telling myself it was temporary. I didn't want to be a burden. I folded laundry, cooked dinner, took their dog, Lexi, for long walks even though my knees screamed. I never complained. Tyler did. It started small, a sarcastic comment when I used the last of the oat milk, a dramatic sigh when I asked if he could help move the recycling bin. Then, things got colder. One morning I heard him in the kitchen whispering, except he wasn't quiet enough. She's just always here, he said, his voice sharp, like a shadow that never leaves. Sierra responded softly. She's grieving. She just needs time. He laughed bitterly. Yeah, well, time is money, and guess what she doesn't have? I stood behind the hallway wall, frozen, mouth dry. Heart pounding in my ears. I felt like I was eavesdropping in my own life. That night I tried to bring it up. I don't want to overstay my welcome, I said gently as we cleared the dinner table. If me being here is putting pressure on you too, just tell me. Sierra didn't look up from the dishes. It's not that, Mom, Tyler shrugged. I mean, we're not a charity. I blinked. Excuse me, he waved a hand. It's just, maybe it's time to start making a plan, like, next steps. You're not working, right? I looked at Sierra, waiting for her to say something, to do something. She dried her hands on a dish towel and said, barely above a whisper, maybe it's time, Mom, for everyone's sake. For a second I thought maybe I hadn't heard her right, but the silence that followed made it clear. No one was going to correct it. No one was going to take it back. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw a plate. I didn't even cry. I just nodded. Okay, I whispered. Okay. I went to the back room, packed 2 suitcases, neither one fully zipped, not that it mattered, and zipped up the third, my heart. Before I left, I asked Sierra one last question. Just one. Do you want me to stay? She hesitated, and that hesitation was louder than any no. I think it's for the best, she finally said. Tyler didn't say goodbye. He just turned the TV up a little louder. Sierra walked me to the porch. The air was cold, Ohio cold, the kind that sinks into your bones and stays there long after you've stepped inside. She wrapped her arms tightly like she was afraid I might break. I already had. Be safe, Mom, she said quietly. I nodded, trying to smile. You too. I walked down those 3 little steps, each one echoing louder than the last, and stood by the curb with my suitcases. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I wasn't coming back. My phone battery was at 4%, no car, no plan, no home. I hailed a rideshare with the last of my app credit and checked into a motel off I-70 that smelled like damp towels and old regrets. Room 212. The key stuck in the lock. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling, and whispered to no one, this is what it feels like. To be extra. An extra mouth. An extra cost. An extra weight in a world that only measures worth in what you can give. And right then, sitting under flickering yellow light with a broken zipper and a stomach full of nothing, I promised myself something. This will not be the last chapter of my story. The motel smelled like old promises, ones that had been broken long before I ever stepped through the door. Room 212 was as bleak as it sounded. The carpet had this strange stiffness underfoot, like it had soaked up too many spilled secrets. The walls were stained with time, nicotine, and silence. The mattress caved in like it had given up. Just like me, I dropped my suitcases at the edge of the bed and sat down slowly, like every joint in my body had to negotiate first. I reached for my phone, hoping for something, a text, a missed call, just checking in, Mom. Nothing. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. And then dimmed some more, and finally went black. I spent the first 2 days in a haze, half in bed, half in thought. I barely ate. I drank tap water from a paper cup and watched the shadows crawl across the ceiling like they were mocking me. By day 3, I realized I had to move. If not forward, at least sideways, so I walked. Half a mile up the road was a library, not a big one. Just a single-story brick building with chipped paint on the trim and a parking lot that cracked under your feet. But inside, blessed air conditioning, free Wi-Fi, and the faint smell of printer ink and books older than I was. That library became my refuge. I'd sit in the corner by the second-floor window, facing east so the sun wouldn't blind me. I filled out job applications on ancient public computers with sticky space bars and mice that jittered when you clicked. I applied for receptionist gigs, part-time shelving, tutoring, anything. I lied about my age, or rather, omitted it. But every time I hit submit, it felt like I was launching a message in a bottle into the middle of the Atlantic. No response, not even a rejection, just silence. I overheard a librarian once tell a college kid, persistence is key. Key to what, I thought, a locked door nobody wants to open. One afternoon, as I walked back to the motel in the humid August heat, I caught my reflection in the glass of a bus stop shelter. I barely recognized her. My blouse clung to my back with sweat. My hair, once thick and pinned back neatly, had thinned into something that curled at the ends from neglect. My eyes looked tired in a way makeup could never cover. I was alive, sure, but I didn't feel living. That night, I went down to the motel's laundry room to wash the few outfits I had. The machines groaned louder than my knees when I squatted. A flickering fluorescent light above buzzed with an anxious rhythm. And that's when I met her. She sat 2 chairs down, thin frame, short silver hair tucked behind her ears, floral print house dress, and orthopedic sneakers. She held a crossword puzzle in one hand and a half-empty can of Diet Dr. Pepper in the other. Without looking up, she said, "You look like you just walked out of a country song." I blinked. "Excuse me," she smiled without showing teeth. "You know, woman left behind, everything packed in the car, windows down, radio loud, but no real destination." I managed a soft laugh. "That obvious, huh?" She folded her puzzle book and looked at me for the first time. Her eyes were piercing, clear and fierce like a hawk's. "I've lived here 2 years," she said, "long enough to spot heartbreak when it walks in with a laundry basket." "Karen," I said, offering my hand. "Gloria," she replied. Her handshake was firm but warm. "Widow, originally from Dayton, retired lunch lady, reformed chain smoker, part-time laundromat therapist." That made me laugh, really laugh for the first time in weeks. We sat there for over an hour while our clothes spun in circles. She told me about losing her husband to emphysema, about her son who only calls when he's in trouble, about the neighbors who borrowed her kindness and never returned it. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Sometimes you raise lions, but they grow up to be wolves." I looked up startled. "What do you mean?" She leaned back, her eyes on the spinning machine. "I mean," she said slowly, "you raise them to be strong, brave, independent. But sometimes, they turn on you not because you failed, but because they forgot who kept the cage open." I swallowed hard, my throat burned. She wasn't just talking about herself, she was talking about me. "And see, Era," I whispered. She used to hold my hand every time we crossed the street. Gloria nodded. "Now she doesn't even look both ways before she runs you over." There was no malice in her voice, only truth. The kind of truth that sits in your chest like a stone and refuses to budge. Before I left, she pulled something from her purse and handed it to me. It was a small, wrinkled note with a phone number. "Call if you ever need to scream," she said. No judgment. I screamed too, into my pillow, into the microwave, into God's voicemail box. I took it. "Thank you," she winked. "Screaming's cheaper than therapy and less paperwork." Back in my room, I laid the note beside the lamp. I didn't call that night, but just knowing someone saw me, really saw me, was enough to keep the loneliness from strangling me in my sleep. The next morning, I woke up to another silent phone. No texts, no calls, but I wasn't waiting anymore, because somewhere between spin cycles and soda cans, I had remembered something. Being unwanted doesn't mean being nothing, and I was just getting started. It started with a cardboard box. The last one I almost didn't pack, the one that sat under my motel bed collecting dust and regret. I'd brought it out of habit more than anything. It had been tucked in the back of my old hallway closet for decades, marked Karen Misk. In faded blue Sharpie. Half the contents weren't even mine, just pieces of old lives I didn't want to throw away. That night the air conditioner groaned louder than usual. The motel was unusually quiet, eerie even, so I pulled the box up onto the stained bedspread and opened it with the same care you'd give a memory that might bite back. There were birthday cards from Sierra, crayon scrawls turning into teenage sarcasm. A church bulletin from James's memorial service. One of Lexi's old shoe toys. I don't even know why I packed that. Then near the bottom, wrapped in a yellowing silk scarf I vaguely remembered my mother wearing in the 80s, was the journal. It was old, real old, leather-bound, fraying at the corners and smelling like dust, tobacco, and something faintly sweet like cedar. I stared at it for a long time before I opened it. I had never seen it before. It wasn't James's, I knew that immediately. The handwriting was sharp, deliberate, all caps, the way men used to write when they didn't trust cursive. I flipped to the first page. April 3, 1976, met with R.B. and C.C. at Beale and Colton. Advised to keep the trust off-grid until further notice. Silent Trust 89C is active. Ruth believes Toledo jurisdiction is safest. I paused. I read it again. Slower. Trust, lawyers, Toledo. What the hell was this? I kept flipping page after page of cryptic entries. Some pages were just dates and names. Others had odd little notes in the margins. Call Landry 4 p.m. Hold back disbursement until signature received. Cannot name Karen publicly, must protect Sarah's record. My stomach turned. Sarah was my mother. Karen was me. And this voice on the page, it had to be him. My biological father. The man whose name my mother never said aloud. She always called him a mistake or a phase, depending on her mood. Once, when I was 16 and asked about him, she snapped, "Some people are better left buried." That was the end of that, but he hadn't buried me apparently. Not completely. I sat back against the lumpy pillows, journal in my lap, chest rising and falling like I'd just run a marathon in place. 1,000 questions raced through my head and not one had a clean answer. I whispered aloud, "What did you do? And why didn't you ever tell me?" The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the vending machine outside. And then something shifted inside me. This wasn't just nostalgia, this wasn't grief. This was something else, something sharp and sudden and full of motion. Purpose, that was the word. For the first time since Sierra slammed the door with kindness, since Tyler's indifference burned through my skin like acid, I felt a flicker of purpose. I wasn't going to beg for space anymore. I wasn't going to wonder what I'd done wrong. I was going to find out who I really was. The next morning, I carried the journal into the motel's breakfast room, if you could call it that. A counter with stale muffins, lukewarm coffee, and a microwave that blinked 12:00 no matter what you did. Gloria was already there, sipping black coffee from a styrofoam cup and scanning a thrifted fashion magazine like it was the New York Times. She looked up. "You look like you didn't sleep, or like you found something you weren't supposed to." I slid the journal across the table. "Both," she tilted her head, lips pursing. "Well, damn, that looks serious." "It is." She flipped through a few pages, nodding slowly. "Silent Trust, oil leases, Toledo." "Honey, you just walked into the middle of a Cold War drama." "I think it's my father's," I said quietly. "I never knew him, my mom refused to talk about him. But this is his handwriting, and it's about me and money and secrets." Gloria didn't flinch. She tapped the page with her nail. "Beale and Colton, law firm, that's your lead." I exhaled slowly. What if I'm wrong? What if this is all just nothing? She set her cup down, hard. "Karen, listen to me, you're not nothing, you're not crazy, and you're sure as hell not some extra mouth. If this man left something behind, if he tried to protect you in his own twisted way, you have every right to find out." I nodded. "You ever think it's too late to rewrite your story?" She smiled, tired but warm. "Honey, I'm 71 and I just started journaling again. If you're breathing, it's not too late." That night, back in my room, I sat at the tiny desk under the flickering lamp and opened my laptop. I searched for Beal and Colton, Toledo. A listing came up. Firm closed in 2003, but a partner named Charles E. Colton had moved on to another practice. Colton, Merck and Bloom, still operating, still in Toledo. I clicked on their website, found an email address, then hesitated. Do I really want to open this door? I looked at the journal again. I thought of Tyler's smirk, Sierra's silence, the motel walls closing in like a coffin, and then I typed, "To whom it may concern, my name is Karen Blake. I believe a former client of your firm, possibly listed under Silent Trust 89C, may have listed me as a beneficiary or named party." I stared at the blinking cursor. Then I hit send. The moment the email left my outbox, I felt it, that flutter of fear and fire. The truth was out there, somewhere between a dusty diary, an unsaid name, and a city I hadn't visited in over 20 years. And this time, I wasn't waiting for someone else to save me. I was going to save myself. The bus to Toledo rattled like a broken promise. It was a gray morning, one of those mid-Ohio skies where even the clouds looked tired. I sat near the back, gripping the leather journal like it was a life raft and staring at the smudged window as the landscape slipped by. Barn silos, rusted water towers, towns with more churches than traffic lights. I hadn't been to Toledo since 1991. I was 25. I'd come with James for a weekend job fair at the community college. It rained the entire time. Now I was going back alone, with questions that felt older than I was. The law office was tucked inside a crumbling 3-story building near downtown. It smelled like old wood and older men. The door creaked as I stepped inside. A tiny brass plate on the glass read, "Miles H., Landry Estate and Trust Law, retired by appointment." I didn't even have to say why I was there. The secretary, gray bun, half-moon glasses, took one look at me and buzzed me through with a nod. "Room 2, she said quietly, like we were in a funeral home. Miles Landry stood when I entered. He was in his 80s, maybe older, but sharp-eyed and surprisingly tall. His suit was beige, pressed but outdated, and he wore a gold watch that looked like it hadn't ticked in years. "Ms. Blake?" he asked, voice gravelly but warm. I nodded, stepping forward, suddenly aware of the sweat on my palms. I think you knew my mother, Sarah Blake. Back then she went by Sarah Ingram." Miles didn't speak. He just blinked once, then sat down heavily, like the name had knocked the air out of him. "Sarah," he said slowly. "Good God, Sarah Ingram." He opened a drawer, dug deep, pulled out a file so thick it looked fossilized. He laid it gently on the desk between us. "I've been waiting years," he whispered, "for someone to claim this." The silence in that office felt holy. He unlatched the rusted clips on the file. Inside were maps, bank documents, a notarized power of attorney, and letters, so many letters. He passed me one sealed in wax, brittle at the edges. "From Calvin D. Blackwell," he said. "Your father." My breath caught. I looked down at the envelope like it might burn me. I ran my finger over the seal and then I opened it. His handwriting was strong, like the man himself. Bold, angled, deliberate. No apologies, just truths carefully measured and shamefully buried. "Karen, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Maybe I never got to tell you who I was. Maybe I was too much of a coward to ever try, but you were never a mistake, never a burden, never nothing. I couldn't give you my name, but I left you something else, proof that you mattered to me even if I couldn't show it then." He had set up a trust, a private one, untraceable by his legitimate estate. He called it a quiet promise, his way of giving what little he could without risking what he feared losing. The total value, $3 million. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, quiet, still, as if any sound might shatter the moment like glass. Miles spoke gently. He came to me in 1985, said he'd made a mistake that became something precious, said he wanted to do right without being found out. I closed the letter. My hands were trembling. "I thought I was disposable," I said softly, like something someone leaves behind on purpose. Miles leaned forward. "Sarah told him to stay away, said she didn't want her daughter to grow up with secrets or shame. But Calvin," he kept checking in quietly through me. I shook my head, overwhelmed. "Why didn't my mother ever tell me?" He sighed. Maybe she thought it was protection, or maybe it was pride. We sat in silence for a while. Two people surrounded by paper, time, and ghosts. Then I said it aloud, for no one but myself. You are not disposable. Miles looked at me, eyes wet. No ma'am, you never were. After signing the documents, I left the office with a folder tucked under my arm, a check in my bag, and a weight I hadn't even known I carried. Finally lifted. Back on the bus, I didn't sleep. I just stared out the window again, same silos, same water towers, but something was different now. Something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just a woman who got kicked out. I was an heir, a daughter of legacy, a keeper of hidden truths. I whispered to myself, they thought they could erase me, but I'm not even close to being done. When I got back to the motel, Gloria was waiting by the vending machine. She was eating peanut M&Ms and humming a tune I couldn't place. She raised an eyebrow. You've got that look. What look? The kind you get when life slaps you one way and hands you a gold brick with the other. I smiled. Something like that. She tossed me the candy bag. Tell me everything, and I did. I told her about Miles, about Calvin, about the trust. I left nothing out. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and let out a long whistle. Well, damn, she said, you're not just rewriting your story, you're flipping the whole book. I didn't respond. I just stared into the vending machine's glass and saw my own reflection clearer than ever before. That night, back in room 212, I didn't unpack the documents. I didn't check my phone. I just sat at the little desk, lit the lamp, and opened the journal again, this time not with fear but with power, and I whispered, let's begin. Chapter 5, Rebuilding from the Shadows. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not Gloria, not the manager at the motel, not even the church volunteer who'd slipped a business card under my door 2 weeks earlier with the words, "Prayer changes things," scribbled in purple ink. I left room 212 just after sunrise, 2 bags, a laptop, and 1 fireproof folder tucked tightly under my arm. The air was cool, and for once my breath felt easier. The apartment I moved into downtown wasn't glamorous. It didn't have crown molding or granite countertops, but it had clean walls, good light, and a lock I controlled with my own key. I signed the lease under a name I hadn't used before, Ellie James. A mix of my mother's first name and my late husband's. It felt like armor, like putting on someone who didn't cry over missed calls or frozen lasagna dinners eaten alone. The first 2 days, I didn't unpack. I set up a folding table by the window, opened my laptop, and started studying like my life depended on it. Because it did. I watched every tutorial on trust funds, estate planning, asset shielding. I learned how to open a Delaware LLC. How to file anonymously, how to transfer funds between shell accounts to keep eyes off your trail. I studied tax law, memorized real estate terms, listened to realtors, lawyers, and even hustlers break down the system, every loophole, every backdoor, every move you could make if you were bold enough to act like you belonged. And I didn't just learn, I absorbed. I wasn't building an empire. I was building a defense, not for vengeance, but for freedom. I opened my own holding company, JBK Equity Holdings. J for James, B for Blake, K for Karen, or rather the woman she used to be. I hired a young notary from Craigslist to verify the paperwork. She was in her 20s, polite, fast, never asked a single question. As she handed back the folder, she said with a smile, "You've got that CEO look." I smiled back, one side of my mouth lifting. Fake it till it saves your life. On a Wednesday afternoon in late September, I was browsing commercial listings on a foreclosure site when a listing caught my eye. 4 units, near Bexley, old brick construction, listed as distressed, and pending foreclosure. I clicked on the address, and my stomach turned. Sierra and Tyler lived there, Unit 3C. I remembered the number. It was printed on a Christmas card they never sent. I stared at the screen for a long time, so long the page timed out and I had to refresh it. Part of me wanted to close the tab, to walk away, to pretend the universe wasn't laying this particular card in my lap, but another part, the part that had been broken, erased, discarded, leaned in closer. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. I hovered my hand over the mouse. My pulse was a drumbeat in my ears. And then I whispered to myself, let's see what happens when the mouth they couldn't feed owns the kitchen. A click, buy now. The transfer wasn't immediate, but it moved fast. JBK Equity Holdings submitted the paperwork the next morning. The property was already in probate court, and because no other bids had come through in time, the city signed off without delay. Within 11 days, the building was mine. I walked past it twice before entering, hood up, sunglasses on, dressed in a gray pantsuit that screamed municipal intern more than property owner. I didn't knock on anyone's door. Instead, I had the locks changed for maintenance, installed a new building entry system, and filed a notice with the county office to begin a legal rent reassessment. For all tenants equally. No favoritism. But for Unit 3C, that rent increase was going to feel like a pressure cooker on simmer. That night, I opened a bottle of red wine, my first in months, and poured it into an old mason jar. I texted Gloria just 3 words, still standing barely. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a meme of a raccoon holding a martini. Her version of love. I didn't call Sierra. I didn't send a single word, not yet. Let them live in the comfort of forgetting me. Let them sleep beneath a roof they didn't know I now owned. Let Tyler keep feeling in control, because that was the beauty of the shadows. You could see them, but they couldn't see you, and I wasn't done watching yet. Power, real power, doesn't shout. It doesn't slam doors or wave receipts in someone's face. No, it lingers. Quietly. Patiently. It changes the locks without warning, updates contracts with a single keystroke, and waits behind mirrored windows, watching the world try to guess who's pulling the strings. That's who I became. The day the ownership papers arrived, final, stamped, notarized, I didn't even smile. I just breathed, deeply, like a woman who had been holding her breath for far too long. And then, I got to work. I hired Glass and Main Property Group, a boutique management firm that promised hands-off ownership with 5-star tenant communication. They didn't need to know who I really was. They just needed to follow my instructions, execute upgrades on schedule, and never ever mention the name Karen Blake to anyone. We updated the tenant portal, fixed the wiring in the hallways, repainted the stairwell walls that had been scuffed for years. I signed off on new garbage bins, a modern security camera at the front door, and most importantly, a rent reassessment policy. Everything by the book. No emotional edits, no vindictive targeting, just math, just legality. But for Unit 3C, the unit where Sierra and Tyler lived, the math happened to include 2 years of under-market rent, multiple minor lease violations, and one very polite but firm late payment penalty structure. Their new rent, triple, and yes, every cent was legal. The emails started 3 days later. The subject lines came in hot. Urgent rent increase notice seems incorrect. Follow up on new lease rate. Who authorized this? Tyler's tone escalated by the message. At first it was confusion, then disbelief, then that particular brand of indignation that only men like him wore like cologne. He wrote, "We've been loyal tenants for over a year. This kind of increase is outrageous and likely unenforceable. I'd like to speak to someone immediately." A few minutes later, a second message came through. This one, from Sierra. "Is there someone we can talk to, please?" She didn't sign it, "Love, Sierra." She didn't sign it at all. I stared at that line for a long time. Is there someone we can talk to? And then I closed the browser. Not today. I wasn't ready to be seen. Not yet. Later that week, I met with Kara, my contact at the management company. She was in her late 30s, direct, polished, always with a pencil in her bun and her iPad in hand. We sat in a small cafe tucked behind a flower shop. The barista called out orders over ambient jazz, but Kara never missed a beat. She tapped the screen twice. Unit 3C submitted their third formal complaint. He's pushing hard, says they've never missed a payment. I stirred my tea. What's our response? She tilted the iPad toward me, showing the drafted reply. Per Clause 4C of the lease renewal terms, market adjustments and applicable penalties are enforced as per Section 7, Paragraph 2. Tenants may terminate lease early without penalty within 30 days of notice. Perfect, I said. Kara smiled. Some people really don't like being reminded they don't own the roof over their head. I met her gaze, especially when they think they did. That night I took a walk past the building. It was just after 9:30. The air was crisp. Leaves scuttled across the sidewalk like tiny whispers. From the sidewalk, I could see the lights on in Unit 3C. The blinds were cracked open. Tyler was pacing, phone in hand, shoulders tight. Sierra sat curled on the edge of the couch, her head resting against her fist. They didn't see me. I watched. Not as a mother, not even as a landlord, but as a ghost. The kind they tried to bury, and I whispered under my breath, "You erased me, but you forgot to lock the door." The next morning, Gloria called. "Something's different in your voice," she said. "What do you mean? You sound still." I paused. "Is that a bad thing?" "No, sweetheart," she said gently. "Still water doesn't mean dead. Sometimes it just means deep." I smiled. "I think I'm starting to surface." She chuckled. "Well, don't come up too fast, you'll get the bends." I didn't answer Sierra's message, not because I didn't want to, but because I needed her to sit in the very silence she once handed me so easily. The kind that echoes, the kind that doesn't respond, the kind that makes you ask yourself, what did I do? And when Tyler sent one final message, bold, aggressive, demanding to know the owner's identity, I flagged it, archived it, and replied only through Kara. "This matter has been reviewed. The rent is non-negotiable. Power doesn't need a nameplate. It needs patience." And I had all the time in the world. There's something strange, almost cruel, about watching the people you love fall apart from across the street. I'd sit at the corner table of Bean and Vine, the tiny coffee shop with mismatched chairs and a moody barista named Cole who always played sad indie music like it was a soundtrack to his own heartbreak. He never asked my name, just called me Miss Decaf and handed me my drink like we had an unspoken pact. From that window seat, I could see the building clearly, my building. Unit 3C faced the front. Sierra and Tyler's curtains were usually open just enough to catch the light but not enough to block the view. I watched, not like a voyeur, but like someone observing a distant version of her own life. A life where kindness became currency, and I was bankrupt. One rainy Tuesday I saw it happen. Tyler flung something across the living room. It hit the wall and bounced, maybe a remote, maybe his ego. He paced, agitated, shoulders squared like he was ready to fight a ghost. Sierra stood near the window, arms crossed, lips trembling. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't even moving, just absorbing. Then she stepped into the stairwell. Alone. I saw her sit on the second step and press her hands into her face. And cry, not the quiet kind, not the movie kind. The real kind, shoulders shaking, breath catching, silent sobs swallowing sound. My hand gripped the paper cup so tightly it crumpled. Every part of me wanted to run across the street, up those stairs, wrap her in my arms, say, "I'm here." But I didn't move. She had to feel it, that silence. The one she gave me when she looked away instead of speaking up. The kind that stays with you longer than bruises. Later that week, I met Gloria at a real estate seminar in Worthington. She wore a purple pantsuit and brought a tiny notebook that said, "Don't let the bastards win," in glittery gold font. During lunch, I showed her the listing. 2 more buildings, I said, both neglected, both undervalued. One has a community garden overrun with weeds. She whistled softly. "You're not playing anymore, are you?" I sipped my iced tea. "Nope, I'm building." By the end of the month, I owned all 3. Small complexes, 8 units here, 6 units there, but they were mine. I renamed them quietly through JBK Holdings. Had the exteriors painted, the mold removed, the plumbing repaired, nothing flashy, just dignity. I interviewed tenants myself, disguised as a manager under an alias. Most were single moms, hardworking, exhausted, kind. I approved everyone. I waived deposits, lowered move-in costs, offered flexible rent schedules, not out of pity, but because I had lived their story. And I knew what one locked door could do to a woman just trying to survive. One of them, Marisol, was 27 with 2 kids and a part-time job at a grocery store. She hugged me when I handed her the lease. She didn't even know who I was. "You don't know what this means," she said, holding back tears. Everyone else saw me and walked away. I looked at her, really looked, and replied softly, "I know exactly what it means." Meanwhile, across the street, the cracks deepened. The property manager forwarded maintenance requests from Unit 3C. Water pressure too low, AC unit buzzing, trash pickup schedule complaints. I approved only the urgent ones, not to be cruel, but because Tyler was suddenly very interested in being heard. Funny how quickly arrogance turns to panic when control slips from your hands. Kara, my contact at the firm, called one evening. She sounded amused. "Unit 3C submitted another message," she said. "This time they're asking if there's a way to speak to ownership directly." I paused. Tell them, I said slowly, that the owner doesn't do face-to-face, but reviews everything personally. Kara chuckled. You're kind of terrifying in a quiet, poetic way. I smiled faintly. That's the idea. One afternoon I passed Sierra on the sidewalk. She didn't see me, head down, earbuds in, sweater too big for her frame. She looked smaller somehow, not in size, but in spirit. A piece of me cracked, but I kept walking. I wasn't ready, not yet. Because this wasn't just about buildings and leases and money. This was about consequence. About learning what it feels like when the woman you discounted starts signing your future in dotted lines. This was about becoming. Later that night, I lit a candle in my tiny kitchen, sat by the window, and journaled for the first time in years. I wrote, you thought I was gone, but I was just growing quiet roots. Now I am the ground beneath your feet. It was raining hard. The kind of rain that made the windows weep and turned the sky into one endless bruise. I had just made tea, Earl Grey with honey, and settled into my chair by the window, watching the storm bleed across the city when I heard it. Ping, a single email notification. I almost ignored it, but the subject line stopped me cold. I know who you are. My hand froze above the mouse. I clicked it slowly, deliberately. The message opened, short and sharp. I know who you are, and I'll expose everything. There was no greeting, no signature. Just a single image attached, a grainy photo of me walking into the back entrance of the property management office. My hair was in a low bun, my coat pulled tight around me. The timestamp was 2 days old. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, breath shallow. Only one person would send something like this. Only one person would care enough to threaten me, but be cowardly enough to do it anonymously. Tyler. I didn't panic. I reached for my phone and called Miles. He picked up after the second ring. Karen, there's been a breach, I said, steady but low. I need legal protection, and fast. He didn't ask questions. By noon, we'd filed 3 cease and desist drafts, one addressed to the building's tenant under Tyler's full name, one to an anonymous sender, and one generic blanket letter through the property firm to cover our bases. That same afternoon, we contacted my accountant, my lawyer in Delaware, and had every ownership record re-verified under the trust firewall. I upgraded security at my units, installed encrypted emails, pulled every breadcrumb that could trace JBK Holdings back to me. I wasn't afraid, but I wasn't foolish. Tyler wasn't just vindictive. He was unstable, and unstable men get dangerous when they lose control. That night, I double-locked my door for the first time in weeks. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, phone in my lap, tea gone cold on the side table. Rain kept coming, steady, relentless, like the universe refusing to blink. At 10:37 p.m., my doorbell rang. I jolted, heart in my throat. 3 soft buzzes, not frantic, not threatening, just sad. I pulled the curtain back and peeked through the peephole. It was Sierra. Soaked, pale, alone. I cracked the door open. She looked up slowly, her hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes rimmed red. Her voice came out hoarse. Can I come in? I didn't answer. I just stepped aside. She entered quietly, barely lifting her feet. She stood in the middle of the living room like she didn't recognize it, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be comfortable anymore. She didn't take off her coat, just folded her arms and whispered, I know about the building. I closed the door behind her. And Tyler, she said, voice trailing, he's been looking. I told him to stop, but he's been obsessed, paranoid, accusing, searching every email. He followed me to work, said he was making sure I wasn't colluding, his word, not mine. I stayed silent. She looked at me. He thinks I'm part of something, that I'm hiding something. Are you? I asked softly. She shook her head slowly. Not intentionally, but I found your name on a document, security notice, cross-checked the management firm. It wasn't hard, I just didn't want to believe it. Her voice broke. You own it, don't you? I nodded once. Sierra exhaled, a sound that carried years of confusion, guilt, and quiet unraveling. Why didn't you say anything? I moved past her and poured 2 cups of tea, sat down, gestured for her to sit. She hesitated, then did. Because, I said quietly, you needed to feel powerless before you'd ever understand what you gave away. Her eyes welled again. I didn't mean to, she started. You stood by, I interrupted gently. When he pushed me out, you said nothing. I was scared, she said. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that you'd be okay, that we'd talk later. Later never came. She looked down, the coat in her lap began to tremble. He scares me now, she whispered. That's not new, I said. You're just finally seeing it. She swallowed hard. What do I do? I met her eyes. You survive him or you leave him. But you stop pretending he's not who he is. We didn't solve everything that night. She didn't apologize the way I once imagined she might. She didn't cry in my arms or beg for forgiveness. But she stayed. We talked honestly. For the first time in years, we didn't orbit around each other's pain. We sat in it, together. That was something. Before she left, she paused at the door. He's going to spiral now when he realizes he can't control this. I nodded. I'm prepared. She hesitated. I'm not sure I am. I stepped closer, gently but firmly. You'll find out, I said. Sooner or later we all do. She turned back one last time and whispered, I didn't forget you, Mom. I just stopped looking. Then she left, and I stood there, hand still on the door. Heart cracked but not broken, because the girl I once raised had finally looked up. Even if only for a moment, she had seen me. She looked smaller, not physically, but in spirit. The Sierra who used to bound through the kitchen in socked feet and spilled juice on the rug was gone. And the woman standing in front of me now, shoulders slumped, eyes dull, lips pressed too tight, was someone trying to hold herself together, with threadbare strength. Is it okay if I, just for one night, she asked. Her voice was barely above a whisper, like even asking took effort. I nodded slowly. No lectures, no terms, just space. She slipped inside like a shadow, careful, quiet, uncertain. I didn't hug her, she didn't ask, we just coexisted for a moment. The kettle whistled. I poured the tea, peppermint, her old favorite, and set it on the table between us. She didn't reach for it, just stared. We sat in silence. A heavy, raw silence, thick with everything we hadn't said. Her hands fidgeted in her lap. Her fingernails were bitten down. She hadn't even taken her coat off. He's changed, she said finally. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe he was always like this, and I just didn't want to see it. I watched her quietly, closely. Sierra blinked fast, as if holding back more than tears, like shame, like fear. I told myself he was just stressed, or that he didn't mean it. That if I just kept things calm, it would stop. She paused, but it didn't. I didn't rush in, didn't interrupt. Instead, I said the one thing I had wanted to say for years, but never knew if I'd get the chance. I can't fix what he broke, I said, but I can tell you I never stopped waiting for you to look up. She looked at me then, really looked, like someone recognizing the shape of a tree they passed 1,000 times, but never saw until it bloomed. Her chin trembled, but she didn't cry. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. I don't want your money, she whispered. I don't want you to fix it. I just needed to be somewhere he couldn't find me. I pushed the blanket on the couch toward her. You'll be safe here. She looked down at the tea untouched, then curled onto the couch like a child. Shoes still on, shoulders still tense, but breathing. I watched her for a while, just breathing. That night I walked into my room, closed the door, and finally broke. Not loudly, not angrily, just quietly. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands trembling, and cried for the first time in months, not just because she came back, but because I had no idea what to do with her now that she had. There's a kind of grief that comes after hope, a softness that hurts more than the betrayal itself. I wanted to protect her. I also wanted to ask why she didn't protect me. I wanted to hold her. I also wanted to push her away. I wanted her to stay, and yet I didn't trust that she would. The next morning she was still there, blanket tangled, eyes swollen, tea still untouched. She looked up. Thanks for not turning me away, she said, voice scratchy from sleep. I gave a soft smile. Thanks for knocking. We didn't say more, but something shifted, like a door that had been welded shut. Finally creaked, not open, not yet, but unlocked. It was humid that evening, one of those spring nights in Columbus where the air feels like it's carrying secrets. The lobby buzzed with quiet conversation as folding chairs scraped across the floor. Tenants filtered in one by one, clutching paper agendas and reusable water bottles. Some wore sandals, some wore work boots. Some had kids tugging at their sleeves. I stood in the back for a moment, watching. Not just the room, him. Tyler sat near the front, legs sprawled like he owned the floor, arm draped over the back of Sierra's chair. He hadn't seen me yet. Good, I wanted him to feel comfortable. Just long enough to drop the floor out from under him. Sierra looked worn, hair pulled back, jaw clenched, hands folded too tight in her lap. Her body was in the room, but her soul was pacing somewhere far away. Kara, the property manager, stepped forward to open the meeting. She clicked her pen and smiled with all the forced enthusiasm of someone who's used to moderating tenant complaints. We'll begin with building updates, new trash bins, landscaping repairs, and adjusted mailbox schedules. Polite nods, murmurs. Tyler leaned in toward Sierra and whispered something. She didn't respond. And Kara continued, as always, we'd like to introduce the property owner who's here tonight to speak directly with residents. Please welcome Karen Blake. The room turned, head swiveled, a pause stretched. Then Tyler stood up so fast his chair screeched backward. You, he barked. You're kidding, right? This is a joke. His voice boomed through the lobby like a slap. A few people blinked. A woman in the back shifted uncomfortably. I stepped forward slowly, heels echoing against the tile, calm, composed. No, I said clearly, my voice firm and even. This isn't a joke. I glanced at the agenda, then at him. This is structure, order, respect. Then I looked straight into his eyes. This is what power looks like, when you never see it coming. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was heavy. A weight that settled over the room. Tyler's face twisted. You think this makes you better than us? I tilted my head. No, I think this makes me the one in charge. He moved forward, fists clenched. You manipulated everything, set us up. No, I replied. I offered the same terms to every tenant. You just never imagined the rules would apply to you. He laughed bitterly. She's insane, he said loudly, turning to the room. You all see this, right? She's obsessed with control. She wants revenge. From her seat, Sierra slowly stood. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply turned to face him and said, quiet, trembling, but crystal clear, she's not your enemy. You are. Tyler's mouth opened, but no sound came. The room remained silent. No applause, no dramatic crescendo, just silence and the sound of a man unraveling. He left before the meeting ended. Mumbled something about calling a lawyer and not standing for this. No one stopped him. I watched his back disappear out the glass doors, hunched with rage and fear and the slow realization that he had just lost everything. Sierra didn't sit back down, she just stood beside me. No one said anything. They didn't have to. Sometimes the loudest victories come without noise. Later that night, back at my apartment, Sierra sat at the kitchen table flipping through a book of old photographs. Her fingertips trembled as she turned the pages. Birthday parties, holiday mornings, school plays. Do you think he ever loved me? She asked softly. I took a long breath. I think he loved how you made him feel about himself, I said. Not about you, she nodded slowly. One tear fell down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. I used to think I was weak for staying, she whispered. Now I wonder if I was just scared of being alone. You weren't weak, I said. You were trying to survive, and now you're choosing something better. She looked up at me. Am I too late? I reached out and took her hand. No, baby, you're right on time. The apartment looked bare the morning Sierra moved out. She didn't take much, just 2 suitcases, a thrift store nightstand, and a stack of notebooks wrapped in twine. But it felt big, like watching something unspoken loosen its grip on both of us. She stood at the door for a long second, hand on the knob. I'll text when I'm settled, she said. I nodded, arms crossed over my chest. I know. Then she gave a soft, almost shy smile. Thank you, Mom, for everything and also for nothing. I raised a brow. Excuse me, she shrugged, for not trying to fix it all, for letting me try on my own. Tyler disappeared the following week. No calls, no emails, no drama this time, just gone. Kara, the property manager, handed me the vacate notice and a set of keys. He left the place cleaner than I expected, she said. No forwarding address, just 2 words scrawled on the kitchen counter in Sharpie. She handed me a photo from her phone. It read, not worth it. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then handed it back. Sounds about right. Sierra didn't ask for help with the deposit, or a loan, or a co-signer. Instead, she got a part-time job at a local art gallery, a quiet space filled with curious sculptures and paintings that looked like secrets trapped in color. She started therapy, joined a grief support group, signed up for night classes at the community college. When she brought her new resume over, I helped her format it. Gave a few pointers, nothing more. She asked me not to interfere with her rent. I need to know I can hold myself up, she said. I understood that kind of need intimately, so I nodded and stepped back. We didn't fall into some magical mother-daughter rhythm. There were awkward silences, stilted dinners, missed calls, But there were also new things, smaller, more fragile things. She sent me photos from her job of a girl who walked into the gallery and burst into tears standing in front of a sculpture, of an older couple who argued for 20 minutes about whether a painting was peaceful or chaotic. Sometimes she'd stop by, not to unload, just to sit, to be near. I'd make tea, still peppermint, and we'd watch shows we never finished. We weren't best friends, we were rebuilding, one slat, one nail, one cautious crossing at a time. One Sunday she brought me a painting. Wasn't framed, just a canvas tucked under her arm like a secret she hadn't decided to tell yet. She held it out unsure. "It's not good," she said, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I took it gently. It was abstract, sweeps of deep blue tangled with ember red. The colors bled into one another, layered and smudged like waves crashing against firelight. There was no form, no center, just motion, energy, fracture, fusion. "What's it called?" I asked. She looked down at her shoes. "Us," she swallowed. "Not whole, but alive." That night I hung it in the hallway right by the front door, so we'd both see it, coming or going. A reminder that letting go doesn't mean losing. Sometimes it means finally making space for something real. The last box was lighter than I expected, just old books and a vase shaped like a teardrop. I sat it down beside the front door of my new house in Westerville, then took a deep breath. The neighborhood was quiet, early morning light streaming through maple trees, dew clinging to porch railings, and the distant laughter of kids chasing each other near the park. That park? The same one where Sierra used to run barefoot in the grass, pigtails bouncing, screaming with joy over sidewalk chalk and orange slices. That memory hit harder than I thought it would. But I didn't cry, not this time. The house was modest. Single story. Pale blue shutters. A wide kitchen window that overlooked the street. It didn't boast, but it didn't apologize either. It was mine. I bought it in cash. No mortgage, no signatures but my own. And the first morning in that home, before unpacking, before breakfast, before brushing my teeth, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen in my hand and wrote a check. $75,000. Payable to New Roots Foundation, a nonprofit I'd quietly supported for months. Their mission was clear: shelter for older women at risk of homelessness. Women like me, or rather, like who I could have become. On the memo line, I paused for a moment, then wrote, "For the mothers who were told they were too much." The letter that accompanied it was short, no grand speech, no sad backstory, just one sentence. "Help them before they think they are disposable." That night Sierra stopped by. She brought dinner, Thai takeout, and 2 cans of ginger ale. "You settling in okay?" she asked, setting the food on the counter. "I am," I nodded. "You?" She pulled out a container of green curry, then smiled. "I'm learning, still scared sometimes, but not stuck anymore." I handed her a fork and leaned against the counter. "Scared means you're growing, stuck means you've given up." She looked at me, really looked at me. "Thanks for not giving up on me." There was a pause, a quiet, humbling one. "I did," I said, "for a while, but that wasn't the end of us." She blinked fast, bit her lip. "So, we're still us." I opened the drawer, pulled out a folded dish towel and handed it to her. "We're whatever we rebuild, one meal at a time." We ate in the living room, sitting on mismatched chairs, balancing containers on our knees. And somewhere between bites of curry and stories about the gallery's new exhibit, we started laughing, really laughing. The kind of laughter that makes your ribs hurt, that chokes out grief, that doesn't ask for permission. For a brief second, I remembered the version of us before the silence, before Tyler, before betrayal, and it felt real again, not perfect, but real. After she left, I walked through the house one last time. I touched the front door, painted it myself the day before, a soft brick red, bold, rooted. I ran my hand along the hallway wall where I'd hang Sierra's painting next week. The swirl of blue and ember, her version of us. And finally, I stepped out onto the porch, barefoot, holding a cup of tea. The stars had just started to appear. I whispered to no one and to everyone, "I am not an extra mouth." Pause. "I am the table, the roof, the damn deed." I sipped the tea, smiled to myself because they had no idea. The woman they discarded, the one they called dead weight, the one they thought too quiet to matter. She became the foundation, and brick by brick, she built herself back into something unshakable. You know, I used to believe that love was about sacrifice, about giving until there's nothing left. But this journey taught me something deeper. Being needed is not the same as being respected. And being a parent doesn't mean you should accept being mistreated, especially by those you raised. Sometimes the people you pour into will turn around and treat you like a burden, but that doesn't mean you are one. It just means they were never ready to carry the weight of your worth. What I've learned is this: you can rebuild no matter your age, your past, or how broken your heart feels. You can go from forgotten to unstoppable. And if you're listening to this right now, wondering whether it's too late for you, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me. You are not too much. You are just in the wrong place. Find your place, find your roof, and if you can't find it, build it yourself. Now, I want to hear from you. Has someone ever made you feel like an extra mouth? What did you do to reclaim your worth? If this story made you reflect, drop a comment below. Your story might inspire someone else. If you've got a different take, share it. I read every reply. And hey, if you love true, emotional stories with twists and heart, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Because sometimes healing starts with a story.